Okay, class, we're back with part 3 of the lactate threshold lab. We have the results. The highest VO2 achieved during Evan's test was 34.2 ml per kg per minute. In order to determine if that was a max or a peak, I looked at the values that were surrounding the peak value here. Remember that they have to be within 2.1 of the peak value on either side to be a max. And it looks like that occurred. So for this particular test, we would call this a VO2 max. In terms of the classification for that VO2, admittedly, Evan doesn't do cardio and he's more of a runner than a cyclist, so his VO2 max was not probably an accurate reflection of his true fitness level, but his ranking was actually very poor, in the 10th percentile for a person of his age. As far as the validation criteria, max heart rate achieved was 172. So that was not within 10 of his age predicted max, which we calculated to be 197. His RPE max was a 17, so that did satisfy, had to be 17 or higher. His RER had to be greater than 1.1, so he got a 1.27, so that one was satisfied. And then lastly, his highest lactate, the last lactate measurement at the end of the test, which you all might have missed in the video, was 10.3, and that was the highest lactate recorded. Remember, it just has to be greater than 8 in order to satisfy the criteria. So he did get 3 out of 4 criteria satisfied, which would mean that, yes, this was a valid test, okay? Then lastly, to finish up, we wanted to look at his ventilatory threshold and his lactate threshold. Now, what I did in order to calculate this was I looked at the data printout that we created from the test, and I'll post that on Blackboard for you to have to look at yourself. But I looked at first where the ventilatory threshold occurred. So I looked at the VE column, the volume of expired air column, and I looked for the point where there was the largest jump from one sample to the next. That occurred at roughly 4 minutes and 45 seconds. And that was equivalent to a VO2 of, the percentage of his VO2 max was 79.5%. Okay, so he, according to the test that we just did, he reached his ventilatory threshold at 79.5% of his VO2 max. In terms of lactate, usually they're pretty close in time. I looked at his lactate accumulation at each stage, and it looked like his lactate crossed 4 millimoles per liter at about the 5-minute mark, so pretty close to when he crossed the ventilatory threshold a little bit afterwards. And the percent of VO2 max there was 84%. So again, it's pretty common that these two numbers are not the same, but they should be in the same ballpark of one another. And it doesn't always mean one occurs before the other. Sometimes they flip. It just depends upon the individual, what type of training they do, how familiar they are with the mode, etc. So let me just show you a couple other numbers that you might have missed on the lab. So we had the 1 minute recovery numbers. Heart rate was 125, 1 minute post. 3 minutes post, it was 100. Lactate was 12.6 at 1 minute recovery, 15.6 at the 3 minute recovery. So I think that's all the data that we need to look at. I'll post this stuff on Blackboard, and we'll come back and talk to you next time. Take care.